It's been a long time since I've done one of these videos where I bring someone on the channel and discuss a book with them that has been impactful in some way in their lives. And today I spoke with my good friend Kit. I've known him for a very long time. He's not a booktuber. He's not on YouTube whatsoever. But I brought up this series to him some time ago, and he told me about a book that had highly impacted him as a young boy, and that is The Long Walk. What I find most interesting about this conversation is that Kit first read it when he was around 13 or 14, then read it again in the 90s, and then read it again recently as a part of a buddy read on my Discord server. So if you guys want to participate in any more of those, the link is down below. It's completely free to join, and we do these at least once a month, it seems like. So with that said, I hope you enjoy this long talk about The Long Walk by Richard Bachman, aka Stephen King. Kit, thanks for hanging out with me. Talk about the book.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Cool. So The Long Walk, I guess my first question is, when did you first discover The Long Walk?
I would have been either 14 or 15, and I believe I got the book as either a birthday or Christmas present.
Oh, do you remember who might have got it for you?
I think it was probably my dad, but I could be wrong.
Gotcha. Okay.
It was probably my dad if I was to guess, though.
So we had a, just so you guys know out there, we had a read along, like a buddy read on my Discord server with this book. Kit read it again for, would you say like this was the first time in 30 years?
Approximately, yeah.
Approximately?
I believe I read it the last time was in like the early 90s, although it might have been mid 90s, but I'd say, yeah, 30 years is probably.
Okay, so how do you feel about it back then? Because I can see, having read this book now, I can see how this would be a really cool read for someone who's 13 or 14 in a lot of ways. But coming back to it so many years later, how do you feel about it now? Are there any major differences? Do you feel like it's kind of a nostalgic thing for you, or are you finding some new things that you didn't notice back then?
There were a couple of things I did notice that I don't remember really focusing on back then. I would say it's largely a nostalgia trip, in that, like I say, I first read it when I was 14 or 15. I read it a few times around those, 16, 17, 18 ages, basically around the ages of the characters in the book. And I just had different likes and dislikes back then that I do now, and I can look at things more critically. I've consumed far more stories since then. So I was a bit more critical this time. As I said in the Discord, back then I probably would have given this a 9.5. Now it's maybe a 7 or 7.5. And even then, nostalgia might be doing some of the talking there. And really, the concept of the story and the world that exists in, that's probably doing some really heavy lifting.
Yeah, for those of you out there who don't know, and Kit, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first book that Stephen King wrote, right? I think it was published after Carrie, but he started writing it as a freshman in college. Is that right?
I don't know the details. In fact, yeah, I actually don't know the details.
I think I did read that. Yeah. But what's crazy about that, go ahead, sorry.
Well, so what I was going to say is that what I did read is that the reason for the Bachman Books compendium and why they use a different name is that at that point, it's definitely not the first story published. Because at that point, Stephen King already existed and was being called the master of horror. And this were things like books like Thinner and stuff like that, where his books contain supernatural elements. And they wanted this to be separate because all 4 books in the Bachman books, I guess spoiler alert here, don't contain supernatural elements. And so that includes Rage, Long Walk, Rayman, and Roadwork. And so because of that, they wanted that separate from the rest of Stephen King stuff.
Ah, interesting. But
whether or not it was his first story he ever wrote, I don't know.
I think at the very least he started writing it as a freshman in college. And granted, I don't know. Okay. I didn't dive deep enough to see if he completed it, and then after he got big, he said, "Hey, let me dig this thing up and see if people are interested," or if it was one of those things where he had fragments and then finished it later on. But either
Or he might
way,
have finished it. He might have finished it back then, but didn't have a publisher. Got big with his other stuff. Publisher's like, what else do you have so we can publish it? He's like, well, I got these, and
yeah,
they
yeah.
and they say, well, but that doesn't have all the zombies and demons and that kind of stuff. He's like, yeah, but they're like, we could still make a dime on this. So
Yeah, exactly. How can we capitalize further on the Master of Horror here?
sure, sure.
But either way, like I reading it now and having read plenty of books and studying writing for myself for a while, like I'm still very impressed. Like that some 18, 19-year-old kid, granted, I don't know what kind of edits this thing, took to get
Mhm,
it to publication, but it's still
mhm.
incredibly impressive for all my criticisms of this book that someone so young kind of came out of the gate like that. Especially with and Stephen King's known for this, but what always impresses me about Stephen King, and I think it's one of his faults, however, is the way he's able to concoct or write conversations between people. Because there's a lot of conversations in this book. The book for you
Mm.
guys out there, if you're unaware about what the Long Walk is, maybe we should start there really quick. So it's
Sure.
kind of a alternate, or do you want to take it?
Okay, sure. I'll do a quick one. It
Yeah,
takes place in an alternate reality, which I would like to talk about. I would like to talk about
yeah.
the world at some point during this, because it's hinted at, but there's four, maybe five main parts that kind of hint more at what's going on in the world. So it's an alternate world of the United States taking place in the late 70s. Uh, it's at least hinted that that the United States is under a military dictatorship at this point. Although, again, we can talk about that. There is this competition that happens every year where 100 boys around the ages of 16, 17 are chosen to participate in the Long Walk. It starts at the border. It's actually the eastern border of Maine, where it borders Canada, and there's this planned route where the 100 boys have to walk, and the book they have to walk at a rate of at least 4 miles an hour. The movie changes this to 3 miles an hour because 4 miles an hour is probably a little too fast. And if they go under that rate at any point, there are these soldiers on a half track that goes along the route, and they'll give the walker a warning. You go an hour without getting a warning, one of your warnings is wiped away. You have three warnings, and you go below that rate again, you buy your ticket. But that, I mean, a bullet in the head. And
Yeah.
so this keeps going along this route, which becomes the US 1 highway that goes along the eastern seaboard. The walk obviously doesn't go that far. It only takes 5 days. And the last walker remaining wins a bunch of money and the prize,
The
capital P prize,
prize.
proper
Yeah.
noun prize,
Hmm.
which is basically whatever you want. So that is a competition, but because unlike main competitions, one of the rules of the walk is you're not allowed to interfere with any of the other walkers, and to like prevent to slow down the rate, or you can't hold on to someone or something like that. You can't punch somebody. So because of this, various groups of people just start interacting with each other because they have nothing else to do while they're walking. And because you know that only one person is going to remain, the conversations be right. And I wish the book explored this a little bit more.
Yeah,
Could
exactly.
be
That's
as
my criticism, one of them anyway. But yeah.
could be as free as you want them to be, because people will literally be taking these conversations to the grave.
Mhm.
Only one person won't.
Yep.
So that's it. I would say that's a nutshell.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say what was surprising to me as well is that Stephen King is known for being a very verbose writer, and there is a lot of verbosity in this
Mm,
book.
mm,
But
yes.
what really took me by surprise is how you're just thrown into it. I mean, chapter
Yes.
one, there's no like
Mhm.
before the race or before the walk, right?
No.
It's just like
No.
boom, Garrity is signing up. He's
Yep.
is starting, and you just go, and the entire book is the walk. And so I thought that was a really cool concept. And kudos to Stephen King for stretching that out for 400 pages. But I mean, I guess that's his,
311. It's only
oh,
311.
311. Oh, okay. Well, I think the, maybe the Amazon listing,
Oh, okay.
inflated it a little bit, but anyway, so
Maybe
300.
smaller, maybe smaller pages.
I was going to say it felt shorter than 400 pages when I was reading it, but I was reading it on Kindle. So, but anyway,
I hauled through it so quickly.
yeah,
Great. This is like the fifth or sixth time I've read it. So
yeah. So it's a quick read. But like you,
yeah.
I think that, and I don't want to get too much in my criticisms in this video, really, or we can.
No, you can.
It's about.
I'm interested to argue against them.
It's
I might also agree with some.
Yeah. It's kind of what you were touching on, in that the conversations that were being had, I felt like there could have been more depth there. I could have been more manipulation, more. But again, granted, the devil's advocate in my mind keeps saying they're kids. Okay, they're not these adults who've kind of lived some of their life and have very concrete motivations and hopes and desires. Not all of them anyway.
Sure.
And so maybe that's a bit of commentary in showing how these young kids, they don't really have much to talk about other than small talk. They're either like,
sure.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's also the case. I would love the 2,000-page version of this.
Oh, damn. Okay. Tell me more. Tell me more.
I'm exaggerating a little bit, but where a lot more of this could be. I just think there's so many things that weren't explored that much.
Yeah, no, I agree.
With this last read that just weren't explored, whether it's, we mostly focus on a small group of the boys.
Right.
As opposed to, I gotta think that there's other things going. Like I don't need to be in the heads of all 100, of the walkers, but there were so many times where someone buys their ticket and you're just like, okay, I don't know who that person was.
100%. Yeah,
therefore I don't care.
You never got a sense of scale. So there are 100 kids, and you never felt like, oh my God, these numbers are dwindling. Like you said, somebody will get a ticket, somebody will die. You're like, oh, I don't know who the hell that was. And so there's no emotional impact or psychological impact of these kids dying. So, but anyway, continue.
And I think this is where the nostalgia, maybe not nostalgia is the best word, but because I read this first time when I'm like 14 or 15, where I'm actually young, I actually remembered the boys being like 18. So when I find out that Garrity is only 16, when I reread it this time, I was kind of surprised. I was still younger than him, but like I wasn't that different. But they still seemed like, when I first read it, they seemed like older boys. And even when I read it in like early 90s, when now I'm older than the walkers, not that much older. So I wish that we had, there must have been like other groups, and I don't really know how you. So what do you call the narrator, like first person, second, third person, that kind of stuff? What do you call this narrator style of this book?
Yeah, it's omniscient.
Well, but it's sort of omniscient, right?
Well, so King writes an omniscient pretty much all the time, unless it's a first person novel. Because omniscient is where you can kind of dip in and out of heads. So you can be in like a quote unquote third person limited POV, but then you can also zoom out and other things about the story that the characters don't.
Sure, but I don't think that never really happens in this, and you don't ever jump into anyone else's head. And almost everything is told. It's not first person Garrity, obviously. It's
It's third person.
Like third person Garrity, but it's always Garrity.
Man, it's funny. I wish I would.
No, it's always Garrity.
Okay, well maybe then it's third person limited. Yeah, I seem to remember there were some moments though where, because I guess another tell for omniscient voice is when things are described in a certain way that not in the character's voice. So in a classical third person limited, the way how they view the world, the words they use, not in dialogue necessarily, but also in the narrative, are indicative of who they are and their life experiences.
I would argue that it was still always told. It's always told from Garrity's perspective, just not first person perspective. It was
Yeah.
always
I
he thought he saw the like when they would King goes King does a lot of describing the environment, right?
yes.
The nature, the like when they go through
There's always
towns.
thunderheads and yeah,
He's
lots of
talking,
weather
but
talk.
it's
Yeah.
again, it's always from Garrity's perspective when he's noticing, like when he compares, when he can, it reminded Garrity of blah blah blah,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And interestingly enough, I never noticed this before, so I don't know if this is an error with my copy or if this was a mistake, or maybe this was some kind of crazy intentional thing I never noticed before. But near the end of the book, I'd be interested to see if this is in your copy also. At one point, the word I is used, and it's used by the narrator.
Really? I
Yes.
totally missed that. Wow.
It's near the end, and when we finish this up, I don't want to go searching through it right now and waste time, but I caught that. I was like, whoa. And I had to kind of reread just to make sure I'm not reading. It's not like a multi-paragraph, quote kind of thing where the beginning of the paragraph doesn't start with or the end doesn't, it doesn't end with double quotes, kind of thing where you have a multi-paragraph quote from
Mhm.
someone. And I looked for that, but no, it was the narrator. My guess is that this is either an error in the copy of the book, or this may have come from the original story and was just a mistake.
I
I
I I
can't imagine that there's something like,
well,
oh,
you and I both read on digital, and I have to imagine this
I
book,
did not read on digital.
Oh, I thought you
I did
bought I
not read
thought
on
you
digital.
Oh, you didn't. Okay,
No,
interesting.
I kind of wish I did, because then I could have made notes. When I started reading this on Monday, I told myself I should make a lot of notes so that when I talk to Jason about this, I can like bring up the notes, and then after making a couple of notes, I'm like, this is no, this is going to take too long. So I didn't end up taking any notes. So the digital version would be nice, so I could do searches for things.
Yeah, so I read it on the digital, so Kindle. I
Mhm.
didn't notice that though, but again, I mean, it could have been something. Oh, clearly, I totally missed it.
It's one use, and this is just my former job. The reason why I was actually halfway decent at it, coming into me noticing just things that like, oh, that's not right, kind of a thing. So yeah.
Yeah,
Again, I
interesting.
think it's just a mistake. I think it's just a mistake or an error. Yeah. Again, and may even be just a, who knows? I'll have
That's
to look this up.
if it's a mistake, I'd be shocked only because this book's been in print for what 50, 40 years, 50 years. Like
Sure,
to
sure.
have a
So, yeah. Again, I don't want to take up time during this discussion right here to find it,
yeah,
but I'll find you afterwards, and maybe you can,
yeah, yeah.
uh, you know,
I
add
will
it as a
drop it
comment.
in the yeah. I'll pin the
Yeah,
comment if we find
yeah,
it. So,
yeah, yeah.
um,
I'll look it up.
okay, cool.
No, I know it's near the end, and I do know it's like in the last 10 or so dozen
Gotcha.
pages or so.
So I also want to find out from you, like and I probably should have asked this question earlier, but
Sure.
why was this book so impactful to you? Granted, I guess you have to channel like 13 to 14-year-old Kit
Yeah.
and go back to those days and figure out reading this, why did this completely blow your mind from all of the other, you mentioned this was part of a collection of the Bachman books. Why this one?
Mhm.
Why The Long Walk?
So I'd say Long Walk and Rage both, had a big effect on me. We won't talk about Rage during this, and who knows how much we can talk about Rage. Right? Okay. So
Maybe for another video.
maybe for another. Okay. 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 You understand my
Yeah, yeah,
possible
for
reluctance.
sure.
Okay. So I think it's a couple of things why it affected me so much at that age. One is that at that point, all the horror I had read all involved supernatural entities. And because I didn't really believe in supernatural entities around 14 or 15, I had the ability to just like to say, okay, this isn't real. This could obviously never happen. But because this, I think the difference between this and Rage is that Rage is the story of one person's actions, while The Long Walk, to get to this point that you have this competition and you have all these people showing up for it, and that it's televised, and that it's like a part of the society, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people have bought into this.
So it's kind
And
of the collective.
there's nothing supernatural that happens in the book.
No, not at all.
We can argue maybe the ending, but supposedly even the ending is not supernatural. I've since read.
I
So
would agree with that.
so the idea of like this is something that theoretically could actually happen, that was a big effect on me. The thing of it contained characters that were closer to my age than most of the books I had been reading at that point, which dealt with adults. That played a part. And the simplicity of the rules of the walk.
Mm-hmm.
And I like, while the walk is a competition, not really a game, but this was when I was really big into games, that the whole, here's a competition, and this is long before competitive reality shows had really been a thing. Like we're years away from the start of Survivor and that kind of stuff by this point.
Mm-hmm.
So like first time I read this, we're more than a decade away from Survivor. So this whole concept of a competitive competition where in Survivor or those other shows you get voted out. Here it's the ultimate, out where you're dead. And I think it's hard to remember, let's be honest. Me being 14, 15 years old was a very, very long time ago. Have fun making fun of me for that. But the rawness, what would maybe it came down to, it was more so than almost any other book I read at that point. It was very easy for me to put myself into the shoes of one of the walkers and ask myself, what would I do in this situation? And maybe that's it. Maybe that's it right there. That more than anything else I had read up to that point in my life or watched, TV, movies, that kind of a thing, where I could, as these people were around my age, there wasn't anything like necessarily special about them, right? Like even the best athlete on this walk, wasn't like an Olympic athlete or anything like that. And most of the people on the walk were just average boys.
Yep.
Right? Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, there was no quote unquote hero, archetype at all whatsoever in this in terms of like physical prowess or anything.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a bunch of kids.
Yeah. So I think that really was the thing, is that it's probably a combination of, I could very easily put myself into the story and ask myself, what would I do in this situation?
Okay.
Which, I don't know about you, has always been an interesting question to me in any kind of story, event, whatever. Hey, if I was there, what would I do?
That totally makes sense because oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, mixed with the finality of what happens if things don't go right. You buy your ticket, you're dead.
Yep.
And not surrounded by your loved ones.
Mm-hmm. Well, not only that, but all these kids know the rules of the game. They know there's one winner, but they're making these friendships and creating these connections along the way. And then I guess what? Some, yes. Some,
I was going to say,
exactly.
not all.
But that's always at the back of their mind, and that's such a a deep and dark thing to contend with when you're that age. And I don't know that they ever really, completely grasped it, at least most of them. Even when things
100%.
went south, right?
Hmm.
Some of them more than others, I guess, felt a little more. They felt that existential kind
Regretful.
of, yeah,
Yeah.
regret and all other kinds of things. But yeah, I think that's the strongest. I'm glad that you got to read this when you were that age, because I think I could see how it would be highly impactful. Very similar to when I read The Road by Cormac McCarthy about, a father and his son at the end of the world. Like me having a child, like,
Hmm.
you automatically think like, what would I do in that, in those, or in those shoes, right? So, yeah, that's cool. So, did you ever think of yourself like, did you ever put yourself in anyone's shoes in the story? Did you ever like, or did you imagine yourself kind of side by side walking with these kids, or was it strictly like a thought experiment where you're like, well, what if me?
I think it's primarily a thought experiment. What if me? I wasn't able to. At the person I was at that time in my life, I wasn't able to directly relate
Hmm.
to any of the characters. For example, Garrity, who is our main character,
Hmm.
that you see almost everything through. Garrity has a girlfriend. 14,
Yeah.
15-year-old me did not have a girlfriend.
So you're,
Um,
yeah,
so already like that like me, Garrity just felt so much older or
yeah,
more mature.
yeah.
And at that time in my life, I was focused on other things. So
What did you think
what
about? I bet you really like that the very it's the very beginning. So this isn't a spoiler really anybody, but at the, very near the beginning of the book, there's people chanting his name, Garrity number one,
Yep,
Maine's
yep,
best or whatever.
yep,
And
yep.
there's a pretty girl,
Main zone, main
yeah,
zone.
main zone exactly. And he runs up to her and grasps her
Yes,
and they
yeah,
kiss. And so
yes.
I bet you reading that as a kid are like, oh man, this is so cool.
Uh, Interestingly enough, that was not my reaction.
Okay.
It wasn't. It wasn't uncool. It was just more like, this is so foreign.
Oh, okay.
That was my
Interesting.
reaction. This is so foreign. I couldn't imagine at that age. Like, even if the woman had a sign saying, "I want you to come over here and kiss me," I would say, "Well, that's just how I wasn't." You
So Kit,
I did,
yeah, Kit. If they would have been like Kit, Maine zone or California zone, you would have run over there and been like, I don't know what to do. I don't know.
I wouldn't have run over. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, you
I
would
would
have
have
just
like
kept going.
sheepishly waved and said like thank you and just kept on walking.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do that kind of interaction at that age.
Mhm.
Um, and I would have felt kind of embarrassed to think about it. So it was just a foreign, like, whoa, wow. Um, I don't remember all my thoughts on it. I just remember thinking like, is this what other people do? Um, and again, for me, it just made Garrity feel so much mature. And that
Mm.
my thought was, yeah, maybe when I'm around, 18, it was always like maybe a few more years away. And then, once, like, I need to get out of school first. That was my focus. I just wasn't focused on dating. So much less running up to a girl and kissing her kind of thing. So
Gotcha.
I would have been too much in my head being like, what if I do it wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I
It's
was I
just,
was kind of surprised by Garrity's actions too. But again, I mean, that's when we don't know him very well. Um,
sure. But at that point, Garrity has had a girlfriend. So,
yep.
like, and you find out later, oh, they have made out multiple times. So
Mhm.
if that was my situation, I'd probably take that whole situation in the book very differently.
Mhm.
But because I don't really care if people know, it's like at that point in my time, like I'd never been on a date, never been kissed. Like, it was also, that was not my focus at that time in my life. I just always saw dating as something, and my parents were okay with me dating, but I, you've heard of parents who will tell their kid like, no dating until you're 18 or stuff like that. That was not my case.
Mm.
That was almost like a self-imposed thing of like, I need to get out of high school. Like, this is my focus. I need to get out of high school and go somewhere that's not here. So that was the focus of my life. So things like kissing girls were just it was something that would happen later.
Yeah. Hopefully later. Yeah, definitely later.
Yeah. Oh, no. There was also that. There was like, hopefully later. I don't know. I'm not
Hopefully
sure.
later I can be a Garrity. Um,
Yeah,
but well,
yeah.
I want to talk about the world because I know you mentioned earlier you
Hey,
wanted to talk about that. And
100%.
again, another fascinating thing for me and surprising was the restraint. So King has never really been one, at least in the more modern version of King, for restraint. And there was you kind of never truly know. Well, I guess you the
No,
details,
they're
like you said,
hints.
there's
They're
hints,
hints,
yes, but
but
it's
they're
not
hints, and they're
right.
small hints.
Exactly. It's not a big exposition dump. It's not
No,
like, granted, you
no.
learn about sort of the walk and what it is through the dialogue as the kids go along, which is a really cool way of doing it. But there was never a big info dump of here's how the world is, here's what the walk is, here's X, Y, and Z. Okay, now let's go. And I thought that was so great because it created this sense of mystery. Like, when is this? You knew it was in America, but you're like, is this future America? Is this alternate history? Like, what's going on? So, why don't you give me some thoughts on the world and really what stood out to you?
But yeah, about that, you never learn what's the entire point of the walk in the first place.
You don't exactly.
Why was this ever put on? In fact, what you do know is that it's been going on for a while. And given the descriptions of clothing and the music, you can kind of figure out a time because they do mention music a couple of times. You can kind of figure out a time of when this was all happening, the references that people are making, the
Mm-hmm.
language that people use.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, like I said, there are four, maybe five instances where they hint at the world being different from ours. Now, can you think of any of those? Because I want to see if I can surprise you with any ones that you have missed.
Hinted at the world is different than ours.
Yes.
Um, as in, like, hey, this is an alternate history. You're saying
Yes.
outside of the game and all that.
Yes.
Yeah. So they talked about computer terminals, computerized terminals. I
Okay.
remember that
Okay.
being
Okay. Fair
something.
enough.
Yeah,
Sure. It was. I
which
mean, they did have computers at that point.
they did, but I guess I
Terminals
never
on a half track would be
correct
definitely something
a
different.
little bit out of the. So I think that was one thing that really stood out to me that gave it kind of a
Okay.
near future.
Well,
But go
let's
ahead.
start with the biggest one, the one
Yeah.
that's mentioned the most. What would that be, Jason? What's the one
Uh,
thing that go on?
well, no, you tell me.
Oh, I just going to say the major.
Okay. How so?
Well, the major. Okay, the major is mentioned more in, in our current. We don't have the major, right? We agree on that.
Do you mean how, or you mean how this is kind of indicating an authoritarian sort of government in a way, where we
Well,
have a major who is, go ahead.
we don't have anyone that we would call the major,
Oh, sure.
right? And where everyone recognizes, oh, we see him on TV and we see him. Now, I'll mention that there's never an indication that the major is actually the person who's in charge of the United States.
There isn't. You're right. He's just in charge of the long walk,
He's just in
allegedly.
charge, and he has notoriety beyond the long
Hmm.
walk. He's obviously a person that is high up in government, as they talk about. Oh, he's always shown with, like, his dog and that kind of stuff in these pictures, and you see him on TV. So he's an important person in the United States. Is he the most important person? That's never really made clear.
Yeah.
Who's like really, really in charge? But
Yeah,
just the
true.
concept of that this person named the major who everyone calls the major. No one calls him by his name. It's always the major.
Yeah.
When anyone talks about him, it's just the major. And I would say that's still different from like our reality, where we'll use the words the president every once in a while, but often people will use the person's actual name, whether
Yeah,
it's
but
Biden, Trump, Obama, that kind
sure,
of thing.
but that didn't really like stand out to me because often in fiction we have you know, people who don't exist in our world, but still it's implied like it's present day, you know, for instance. But also because
Sure.
this entire thing is framed as like a almost a game show, which again is sort of alluded to in a way with all of the little cool excerpts at the beginning of each chapter
Yep.
referencing all of
Yep.
the game shows
Yep.
around. So there is this sense of like it's kind of a game show, maybe it's a government sponsored kind of contest of some way. And so that's why there's a military presence, that's why there's a quote unquote major. So I think that's why that probably didn't stand out to me as kind of a key indicator of you know, how like when is this, where is this? But I can totally see where
Sure.
you're coming
But
from.
I don't like I in our current world we don't have military people that we refer to as only their like that we as a collective society refer
Oh, I see,
to
I see. Yeah, yeah,
as
yeah.
like, oh, and in fact, the interesting thing is major is not the highest rank, at least in the current or even at that time. To be army in the military, because above that you have corporals and then you have generals.
Mhm.
So it was always kind of, and I was really big into military hierarchy at the time I read, and that was always a thing that I wouldn't say confused me, but I did find it a little interesting that it's indicated to be this very very high up person, but
Mhm.
I knew that major was not the highest rank.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just took it as like this guy who's called the major in quotes is the
Sure,
guy who's like he is not necessarily running the world and all that, even though he could be, I guess. More
it
like
could be. No, he absolutely could be.
he is the guy who is running the long walk, right? He has been given
Sure.
this power by up on high, whoever it is, president, whatever, to run the long walk. So no, that's why I love talking about books with other people because it allows me to see other perspectives. Like I didn't think of it that way, but no, it's cool
Sure.
to
So
see like you know we're thinking about it that way.
so then the second thing I'll mention that was distinctly different from our current world
Hmm.
is the squads and getting squatted.
You mean how they're creating groups?
No. Oh, so when we're done with this, look up the word squat because it's always, and so I'm talking about things also specifically that were always used as proper nouns. The major always
Oh,
has
oh,
the
gotcha,
T
gotcha,
and
gotcha,
the M
gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
as capitalized. Squads is always capitalized also.
Yep.
Garrity's father was squatted, which when you read about it means that soldiers came to his house and took him away.
Hmm.
And so squads, again, his the walkers in the book always just talk, oh yeah, the squads, and they just talk about it in a way like, oh, you know what I'm talking about. I read between the lines, they're clearly groups of soldiers where you don't want to get on their bad side, basically. Because then again, like Garrity's father, if you say the wrong things,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
so there's clearly it's the United States that's under some kind of authoritarian, possibly fascist rule.
Hmm.
When you have military, oh, hey, you said something against like the major, we come to your door, we take you away,
Yeah.
and that person's never seen again.
Right.
Garrity's father is squatted when Garrity is about 6 years old, I think, and because Garrity's father is saying negative things about the government,
Hmm.
and or at least negative political viewpoints, and soldiers come to his house and they take him away, and his father is never seen again. Whether the father buys the ticket, whether the father goes to a camp or what like what do they have in North Korea? The workers,
Mhm. The
where
labor camp.
the labor camps.
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't know. We just know that like he's gone, and people just accept that's just what happens.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
other characters in the book talk about, well, I considered joining the squads. There's a sign at one point you see or there's a sign described saying, "My son gave his life for the squads." We don't really ever know exactly what the squads are.
Right.
You just
Just
know that
that.
you don't want to be on the
Right.
bad side of them.
Exactly. You speak up against, you get taken out of your home, you get removed from society. And again, what's so great about that is, like you said, it wasn't in your face. Like it was
No,
talked
it's very
about.
much a mystery.
Right. It's a mystery, but then also you have these really dark elements completely contrasted with kind of like almost like a 1950s
Yeah.
America, right? Where
Yeah.
everybody, all these kids are
Yep.
talking about, I want to get with so and so. It's just all kind of normal kid talk. But then
Yeah.
on the
I spent the
outside, yeah,
summer on the back porch in the hammock.
exactly. And so that's what's so cool about it is you have this really dark undertone, but then these people living in the society, and you got to wonder like, what are they exposed to? What are they not exposed to?
Mhm.
Um, so, but yeah,
Because
no, that's cool.
they seem to all know what the squads are. And another
Yes.
thing I found interesting regarding the squads is that the soldiers on the half tracks are always referred to as soldiers. So soldiers and squads are the soldiers on the half tracks are never referred to as any kind of squad. Again, I'm using the proper
Right.
noun of
Proper
squad,
noun
the
squad.
capital S squad. They're never referred to as that. So this is definitely so for the walkers, this is a distinction.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, again, we'll never know because I'm curious what that distinction is. Because they obviously don't like these soldiers. Walkers do not like these soldiers on the half track. They never show the soldiers any kind of respect whatsoever.
Right.
In fact, when they do acknowledge the soldiers whatsoever in any way, it's always with disrespect. They do not like them. But they never compare them to squads. They never use the word squad in a derogatory way towards them. It's it's an interesting. It's like squads are like these ghosts almost that like be careful how you speak about them. While they have no problem showing disrespect to the soldiers or the other soldiers when they do salute to them when they're getting onto the freeway, the US one, and they do like the whatever 10 what do you call it, 10 gun salute kind of thing or 30 gun
Hmm.
salute to the walkers, and the walkers did the raspberry salute back at them.
Hmm.
If you remember that part, so
Yep.
they have no problem, and they'll even disrespect the major, but that doesn't seem to happen with like whenever they talk about the squads, it's not reverence, but there is it's a different kind of fear. They don't seem to fear the soldiers. They don't seem to fear the major. They do seem to fear the squads, and that's something I found really interesting because that seems to imply to me that the squads are kind of a distinctly different thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I also pulled up an interesting quote. I was looking up squads in my Kindle version,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
Olson says something. You're with the squads, and Harkness says, "No, I'm going to write a book." So it's like he's accusing him of being part of this, like a
Hmm.
spy, like you said, a ghost,
Hmm.
an entity who is observing these kids while they're,
Yeah.
going on this long walk to maybe learn something, psychoanalyze them, or who knows what.
Hmm. Again,
Yeah.
it's just interesting because they don't really get it. Just they could come and take one of your loved ones, and there's nothing you can do about it, and now that person's gone
Hmm.
forever.
Yeah.
And so that's the interesting thing. one more thing. There's two more. I'll hit the lesser one first.
Sure.
At one point, and this is very early in the book, someone, I think it's Garrity, mentions the 51 states of the United States.
Man, did I miss that? Let me try to see if I can find that. 51.
Yeah, 51. It's not numerical 51. Look up
Yeah.
FIFTY dash 0
Yeah,
NE.
I got it right here. So, goddamn, Parker yelled, striding up to Garrity. His face was covered with blotches, and he looked like a drowned water rat. Gary, this was without a doubt, and then he gets cut off. Yeah, the most fucked up state in the 51. Interesting.
So we have 51 states. Now, I remember this from a kid wondering, like, they tell us what the 51st state. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the 51st state. But again, this is just another hint of like, hey, this is a different reality, different place. But it does make you wonder, like, the first 51st state, maybe Puerto Rico? Is it maybe Cuba? Is it maybe like they divided something like California into North California, South California? We don't know. It doesn't really matter, but that was a part that I found interesting.
Yeah, it's great because I've read a handful of Stephen King novels, more recent ones, and he loves to go into detail about the whys and the whats and the hows of a lot of things.
Not here.
Not here. And that is incredible because I feel like usually writers learn that skill later because everyone is eager to, hey, I have all this cool stuff in my head and all this world building and stuff. I need to get it out there. So let me do that. And then later in life, as your career progresses, you learn like, oh no, it's actually more engaging and interesting and mysterious if you don't give as much information. Whereas this,
and here he did when he was a
yeah,
kid, basically.
And again, that's what's so impressive about it is like his sense of restraint in this is pretty impressive.
So do you think you missed that, or you just don't remember reading that?
The 51, I probably forgot it. I've read a few books since this one, so maybe it's kind of on its way out of my head. But for sure, I must have missed it or forgot about it. But that's pretty cool.
Okay, so here's one last one.
Yeah,
the other one where I said like 4 or 5, because the maybe is that there's at least one point where they talk about government shops, and I seem to remember when I read it thinking like, this seems different than what our world we might call that. I don't think that's important. The most important one, and this is why I saved it for last, and this you might want to look this up.
Yep.
Look up change with a capital C.
Change.
Change. Actually, look up the change.
The change. I was going to say because there's plenty of changes. The change.
Yeah. Look up the change.
Okay. I'll keep looking. I don't see any Oh wait, here we go. Yeah. So
did you find it?
Yeah, I did find it. It's Stebbins looks like he's talking to Garrity. And he mentions that in the old days, before the change and the squads, both being proper nouns, when there was still millionaires, they used to set up foundations and build libraries and all that good shit.
The change. That's the only place where it's mentioned.
Yep.
In the entire book. And that, I was laser focused on that when I read that. I don't really remember that from before. But that, like, it's a proper noun.
Yep.
Like, this is a concept that is known in that world that they would talk about in a way to actually make it a proper noun. The change.
Mm-hmm.
What is the change? We don't know.
We don't know. But it's great.
It's when they were still millionaires. So now we have another hint of the world that we exist in, where millionaires do not exist.
Yeah, it's sounds like a very much like a socialist state. So I mean, you could tell that King was probably inspired by a lot of the World War II stuff.
Sure.
I know you and I don't know if we have agreements or disagreements about the potential commentary on the draft, or volunteering for war, how these young kids are often in the context of the
Yeah,
long walk, they know what they're getting into, but they really don't know
sure.
until they're
I,
faced with it, you know?
yeah, I'd say after reading it this time, I'm much more in agreement.
Okay.
With I could see those illusions much more strongly. I think at that time in my life when I was reading when I was younger,
Yeah, you wouldn't
um,
have. I don't think you would have
I
really
wouldn't have really
thought
thought
that.
about that.
Yeah.
Even later on, because if I'm pretty sure I told you so. So what I was saying is that I was supposed to join the military to pay for college. I was going to join the Navy ROTC.
Hmm.
And so, but even at that point, because I wasn't being drafted or I wasn't enlisting, Navy ROTC means I would have been an officer. So that's a very different path that you go down.
Hmm.
You know, if you're an officer in the military, you're not necessarily going to be front and center. You're not a meat shield, certainly. So, um, and if you're joining the Navy in early 1990s, not much to really worry about there, especially. So I didn't I didn't really catch on to it, but after we had talked about this before I started reading, I definitely was noticing more just the way people were talking about their regrets
Hmm.
once they were on the long walk.
Hmm.
You know, once a few of the walkers had bought their ticket, that's when the realization of what have I done?
Yeah.
What have I, like, is this really worth it?
Yep.
I think that the going long periods of time without sleep, the way they react to gunfire,
Hmm.
um, these things all kind of hinted like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see the camaraderie that they have. Like I said, the one thing though that really distinguishes between draft, military, war, and this story is the whole competition aspect.
Right.
That is
Right.
something that is distinct. But I do think everything outside of that, I now could see the comparison.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, I constantly got the feeling. I mean, there's even imagery of there's a guy in an Uncle Sam outfit at some point.
Mhm,
There's people
mhm,
cheering. There's the gunshots. There's the military
mhm,
presence, obviously. There's
mhm.
I just got a sense of like, a lot of these, war movies like Apocalypse Now or Full Metal
Sure,
Jacket, where there's like a platoon of these
sure.
guys, these buddies,
Yep,
and
yep.
they have these bonds and they have their problems. And even there's a moment, which I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it, but there's a moment where there's like, let's just say they agree to take care of someone's significant other,
Sure, sure.
and so that's incredibly familiar when it comes to like a,
Yeah,
like war, in a platoon, and
sure.
your war buddies kind of taking care of
And,
each other.
and the concept that even if you survive, those wounds are always with you.
Oh yeah,
You know,
100%.
the inability to turn it off,
Hmm.
to just go, okay, yeah, back to normal life. Yeah, yeah. I definitely, because I had that in mind while I was reading it, so I was noticing it a lot more. So, mea culpa, however you want to
Well,
put it. I can
well,
definitely see.
well, it's great because it just goes to you had the benefit of reading this, and this is
Yeah.
why I want to go back and read some older books I read as a kid, because you got one impression out of it and it had a massive
Hmm.
impact on you as a kid, but then reading it as an
Hmm.
adult, thinking about it through a different lens with all of your life experiences, now you
Yes.
are seeing it completely different. And so that's what's so cool
And
about the time difference.
sure. And I think also because I have a lot more experience reading, thinking in story terms,
Hmm.
I've watched a lot more movies, read a lot more books since then, that the absence of a standard plot
Hmm.
really kind of screamed out at me. You know,
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line between like first act, second act, third act in this? I have no clue.
Well, that's one thing. It's like while reading this book, because it is so different, I'm just constantly playing devil's advocate with myself. Because like you, I it felt like just a linear trudge from beginning to end
Mhm.
for the most
Yep.
part.
Yep.
There's a couple
Yep.
hiccups, but anyway. But then you're asking yourself, like, well, is that the point? Is King trying to make us feel like we are trudging along with these characters, or is it just a mistake on his part because he was a new writer at the time and hadn't grasped, like, hey, here's how I can improve the characterization, here's how I can improve the pacing? I don't know. I don't know if he's ever admitted it, but it's
Well,
always tough because you can always justify something in a story with, especially in this
uh-huh.
case, I think. But like, is
Yep.
that is that really the truth, or am I just making up excuses?
No, I think it's easy to make up that. I think it's easy to say, oh, it mimics that trudging that they're doing. I really think he was just a very inexperienced writer. He had a
Yeah.
concept
Yep.
and he just wrote. I think that's really probably
Yeah.
what it came down to. He just wrote and then eventually he's like, oh yeah, okay, I gotta end this.
Hmm.
Okay, and boom, 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 here's the ending.
Yeah.
Um, so I just think it was because I would argue that the other books within the Bachman books, road work is aren't they are more structured than the long walk. I still wouldn't say that they are as well structured and mechanically as could possibly be. But I would really have to like think of some of King's later books to really ask like how well structured some of those were plot wise.
Yeah.
I'm sure that I have no question better than the long walk, but now if, I know we have to end pretty soon, but before we end, I remember that one of your complaints was you weren't able to relate to any of the characters.
Well, I would say maybe relate's not the right word. It's more like
Okay.
empathize, feel, because I feel like I can read plenty of books that are about people who aren't at all like me, but the writer
Uh huh.
in such a way gets me behind them, and I feel their plights. Like, again, it comes back to empathy. Yeah, but in this one, I'd say there's one character that I felt for actually, whereas it wasn't
I'm
Garrity.
curious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
no,
ahead.
no, I know which one it is. I'm curious why it's that one. That one. So when you told me the name at that point, I hadn't reread it, and to
Mhm.
be honest, like the only character whose name, like if you told me was Garrity, I'd go, okay, I know who that is. A lot of the other names I didn't remember. So when
100%.
you said
Yeah.
so when you said the person's name, um, I actually got mixed up with a different character.
Oh,
Like
interesting.
I got that person mixed up with Parker.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, because
But it wasn't. But I didn't know if you had said Parker, I wouldn't have remembered who that was either. I didn't remember any of the other names. So it wasn't until I started reading through, and when it got to Parker, it's like, oh, okay, this is not the person that Jason's talking about. And it
oh,
wasn't
okay.
until we
Okay.
got to. I'll just say the name. We can say that this
Yeah,
doesn't give
yeah.
the spoiler
Yeah,
really.
yeah, it's not a spoiler.
Scram,
Yeah, Scram.
Scram with
Mm.
two M's. That I was like, oh yeah, this guy. Um, so I'm curious why, because I would say I didn't really empathize with anyone, but I
Uh,
rarely, I wouldn't say I rarely empathize with characters. It's just that it wasn't important to me in this. It was more an issue of I, I found the characters interesting. Now I always wanted to know more about them. I never really
mhm.
got to know much more about most of them, but I was always interested to know more about them. I think the times I empathized with them was near the end where you have a lot more of the ticket purchases,
Mhm.
shall we say.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, when
sorry.
everything starts coming to a head, for sure. You know, I totally agree.
And
Um,
then I empathize with, what would my reaction be seeing these people who I've now made friendships with
mhm.
buying their tickets,
Yeah.
and I could empathize with the reactions there.
I guess for
Um,
me, the reason why Scram appealed to me
yeah,
right
what's
out the
Graham?
gate, and I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read yet, because I want you
Sure.
guys to read this book. But it's he he's so different than all of the other characters in the the group we're talking about. He's almost like this.
Yes.
He's how do I describe this without spoiling it? He's He's got a good head on his shoulders. He has a very positive outlook on life.
Yes.
He's a very kind of simple, humble sounding guy who doesn't need a lot.
Simple is the best way. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and
fundamentally hinted at that he's pretty dumb.
yeah, exactly. And so I
I think
think,
he even acknowledges that he's dumb.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think because like he's very confident as well. When you first meet him, he's
Yes.
incredibly kind. He's like, "Oh,
Yes.
I walked 80 miles yesterday. This is no big
Yes.
deal."
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I think why he stood out to me and why I felt for him the most is because right, as the reader, and the other characters know exactly what they're up against. And he kind of almost feels like he doesn't really get it. And you feel bad for him immediately because he seems like such a nice, wholesome guy who
Uh-huh.
just doesn't have a clear picture of really what he's up against. And so you never really
That's
know
not my
who's going.
read.
That's not your reading?
That's not my read on
See
him.
that's how that's what I got out of him. When I started reading about this guy and when he gave his little backstory and why he's or not why he's
Sure.
here, but
Sure. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's why I kind of gravitated toward him because he felt so different than the kids. He almost felt
yeah. He does.
more
Well,
and I know
like he's an adult.
yeah, more an adult. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say.
Well, and without giving, I think we know why he feels like he's an. I
Yeah,
mean, he's at a very different place in his life than,
correct.
even though he's
Correct.
like the same age as these kids. He's at a very different place in his life.
Yep.
He has stuff going on in his life that none of these other kids do.
And I love that.
Uh,
To me, because when I first started reading this book, all of these kids kind of felt the same to me. They all kind of
sure.
felt like it was really difficult for me to track who's Parker, who's Olson, wait, who's the guy? You know, like there was no really real, for me anyway, early on, distinctive qualities about these people. They almost felt like vanilla kids, you know? But then Scram comes along, and I think that's what's the genius of his character is he's so different. So he provides this contrast to this, the group anyway that we're introduced to throughout the whole book. So, or with, I should say, even though, like you said,
So
there's another 95 people or whatever.
yeah. But we don't learn about most of them.
Yeah, we know.
So Scram. My read on Scram. I don't think my read is far off from yours. I do agree with most of what you're saying. I don't think I don't think he's like unaware or like really he's getting it slower. I just think that I think there's an issue. I think he's just maybe overconfident, but probably with good reason to be. And I think he just has a kind of simpler view of just like I'm here to do this, or again, if we don't want to give spoilers away,
Yeah,
for my situation,
right.
and and because of my situation being different than everyone else's, I'm able to accept what the possible consequences of this are more easily than others.
Okay,
Although it
so
could be
he's
like
yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it could be argued that because of his situation, that's probably even better reason why he shouldn't be doing this at all.
100%. And so yeah, I mean there is that kind
I
of
think he's so confident because he's definitely indicated that like all things being equal, he's in the best shape.
yep,
He
the
has
best
the best
chances.
mindset.
Hmm.
Like he doesn't give a chuck about like the stuff going around him. Like
Hmm.
he's okay with making friends with people, but he's also okay if like Polly Parker cusses him. Like he doesn't care
Yeah.
because he's just like I'm just here to walk. This is he's not a braggart. Um, it makes he says things that could be brags from other people, but he just says it so matter of factly.
Hmm.
When he says like the odds that he's been given to win, it's just hey, this is just the situation.
Yeah, no, I think
Um,
that's a great read of him as well. Is that he comes off as like maybe he came off to me as kind of naive, but then the more
he
you
might,
talk about it, the more I like the fact that he's more like I've accepted my reality.
uh-huh,
This is what it is. There's no sense
yeah.
in sugarcoating it or pretending otherwise. So I'm just going to do this thing, and it is what it is. Like whatever happens,
And
happens. You know?
I think the reason why I might disagree with the whole naive issue is that okay, I'm
Well,
going to
I'm
really
not
try
saying
and
he
word.
was naive. I'm saying
Okay,
he came off as that way to me immediately when I
okay,
first met him,
okay,
and so that
okay.
immediately kind of because we'd already been on the long walk for a little while when we finally meet
Yes,
Scram, and
yes,
so it's such a great again contrast, and you're already in the headspace of what's going to hapen because you've witnessed
sure.
some stuff, I believe, anyway, and
I
so
see your point.
when he shows up and he's kind of like maybe like you said the way he presented himself wasn't it was kind of like me misreading it in such a way because I'm
Sure,
still looking at it through the eyes of Garrity and the rest of the kids or
sure,
him,
sure.
so
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, and so the reason why I just focus more, I think I was it's more of like this is just kind of his confidence about everything. Is the is again without getting spoilers is how his story plays out. A Scram story plays out. You don't at any point see him have a realization of oh crap.
Yeah, you're right, he doesn't. He's very kind of resigned to the
Yes,
story as it plays out. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and again we don't want to get spoilers on this, but
But that makes it
but
more that makes it so much more heartbreaking to me anyway, you know?
sure, and I can, I mean, Scram is definitely one of the more like I mean, we don't really get to learn that much about Scram because there's only so many conversations that happen with Scram
Mhm.
that we don't like. Scram never does anything that turns us off, I guess is the thing, right?
Yeah, yeah, he doesn't have any
Like
demons that we know
other
about, and yeah.
characters, even if you're kind of for them, they'll eventually say something like, I don't know about that, man, kind of thing. But Scram, it's like the less you know about someone, the easier it is to like them
Yeah.
because you haven't hit that point where they say something that annoys you.
Yep. 100%. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I think he was
like the
a
first
brilliant
5 minutes of you knowing me.
yeah. Well, I think that's why I think he was a brilliant character to throw into the mix.
Yeah, I
Whether or
agree.
not King was really like thinking it through very well or what his
Yeah, I
intentions
mean
were,
that
like
could be
it
the case.
worked. It worked. Um, all right. Well,
Yeah,
I want to
I
go
always
ahead.
wait because I know you probably want to wrap this up. I
Well,
do want to say that
I got one more question after this, and then
I'll let you hit me with the last
yeah,
question.
yeah. No, no, no. Go ahead. Finish what you're saying first.
Oh, so I was just going to say that I don't remember who I connected with as a kid. Probably Verity to extent,
Hmm.
but like I always remember also connecting with Stebbins, and we talked in Discord. There's the question of who would you have been?
Hmm.
You say Barkovich.
Oh no, no. I thought I read it as do in.
Oh no 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 no
Maybe
no no, no yeah,
I
yeah,
must have
you
misread it.
misread. You
Okay. I thought it
misread.
said
You
like
misread.
do in as like out of all
No
these
no
guys, who would you
no.
kill to get out of the party?
Okay, no 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 no. Because that's what I
Uh,
found. That's what I thought was interesting. Because you said Barkovich, he
no,
was
no,
really
no, no.
annoying. Because the question was, who would you be like? I was like,
Oh, I thought it said
okay,
do in.
tell
No.
yourself, Jason. All right. Okay, that's an interesting thing. Um, so my answer was I would want to be like Steppen because I think that's the most intelligent way to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't help myself. You once worked with me. You once shared an office with me. You know how I can be in an office full of people. That I probably would have been more like a McFreeze. That's I always my head says McFries. In the trailer for the movie, he says McFreeze.
McBreeze, yeah. McBride.
How did you pronounce it? How did you pronounce it in your head?
I think. Well, so I listened to some of this in audiobook. So I
Oh,
got the benefit of hearing all the pronunciations. So I got McBreeze anyway early on.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
I've always thought it was McFries.
yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah, okay,
I could see that. I could see you reading it that way
yeah.
for sure.
So
Um,
McFreeze, I probably would have been a McFreeze or a Garrity in
yeah,
that I would be chatting. Come on, you know
yeah,
me.
yeah.
I couldn't help
You would
myself.
you'd be the chattiest one for sure. Okay. Well, one last question before we wrap
Sure,
everything. And
sure.
again, without spoilers, because I don't want to spoil anything.
Without spoilers.
Stephen King has never really been known for his endings. As you know, you've read plenty of Stephen King novels.
Hmm.
How do you
Hmm.
feel about this ending? Without spoiling anything.
So it's oh man, this is interesting. So when this last read, I wasn't as bothered by it. I also knew what was coming. Um, I mean, that's one of the parts of the book I remember the best is the ending. So I know exactly what's coming. I did read. I went on Reddit and people reacting to the trailer of the movie, and people were talking about the ending of the book in that thread.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of surprised how many people had positive reactions. Like, I just read the book, recently and loved the ending.
Hmm.
And I read and without, again, because we don't want to spoil stuff, some of the things that people were saying changed my mind a little bit. I still have the opinion that it just feels, and I feel this way with a lot of Stephen King books, he had to have an ending. He realized, like, I need an ending. And I'm not even saying like the last paragraph or the last page. I think basically the last chapter is one big, oh shoot, I need to have an ending. I need to wrap this up. Okay, this happens, this happens, this happens, and then this happens, and we're done. And so for me, when it comes to stories, it's very important that there is an emotional fulfillment. And it doesn't have to be good. One of my favorite movies of all time still is the movie called The Killer by John Woo.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not a happy ending by any stretch of the imagination. But for me, it's incredibly emotionally fulfilling. Subnautica, one of my favorite video games of all time, as you know, has, I'm not going to count the actual ending as the ending because that's boring. I mean, literally, the ending is technically boring, but really, like, the story ending of Subnautica is not. I guess it's slightly more happy than The Killer, but it's still not the happiest ending. But it was incredibly emotionally fulfilling to me, to the
Mm-hmm.
point as why I think Subnautica is one of my favorite games. Why I keep on mentioning I think you should play it because of how well I think they handled that ending. I think that was by accident.
Interesting.
So so I think that is still my main problem with the ending of this book is that
It feels tacked on to
given
you.
what well, it's just that given everything that happens, it's not just that it's tacked on. I do think it is tacked on. So that's problem number one. I think problem number two is that I don't believe I when I close the book, I don't feel like I don't feel emotionally fulfilled. I don't feel like, okay, I got a conclusion. I'm looking for the next page. And I don't feel that. Like I've read a lot of page turners in my day, and I love page turners. I think this book is a page turner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still looking for that. Wait, that's it? That's still my reaction. Wait, that's it?
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And I think when you have an emotionally fulfilling ending, the audience is not going to say, wait, that's it. They're going to say, that's it.
Yep. Exactly.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
Again,
I
it
think
doesn't have to be happy. It
right.
doesn't
No,
have
no,
to,
no,
I'm not
no.
saying it has
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
happy.
It needs to be the
It's just like,
ending fitting for
it
the
has to be the
story
ending.
that came before. Yeah, I mean that's there's a famous editor, and I always use this quote all the time. Is he always says the ending should be surprising but inevitable. The best ones anyway. Meaning like
Yeah.
you're
I think
kind of like,
that's
oh,
true.
but then you look
That's a
back
great
and you're
quote.
like, how else could it have gone?
Yep.
So
hmm hmm
I agree with you. I think the ending, I could totally see a world where it is tacked on, and like you said, King's like, crap, I got to end it. I guess I'll do it now. I think a product of the lack of emotional resonance, definitely, it's the long game, right? It's all of these things you're peppering in throughout the story, having some kind of payoff. And that was my
Yeah.
biggest criticism, I think, with the book is that there's a lot of great small talk in this book. There's a lot of natural language that King is a
Dialogue.
master of, a lot of
Yeah.
dialogue, but none of it really, or very little of it, I should say, really sinks in because, like you said, at the end, when you get to the end, all those like little breadcrumbs should be like just going off like fireworks in your mind. And you're like,
Agree.
oh shit, this is why it's such a great story. And so, granted, again, I'll say it again, I keep making excuses for Stephen King, even though he doesn't need any. He was a very young man when he wrote this. He was still probably grappling with
Sure.
storytelling chops and stuff. And he has some great, fantastic, memorable stories under his belt that he published after this too. But yeah, he's never been an ending guy. But I think the problem with this is it's a greater problem of what came before, because
Yeah.
part of me likes the ending. Like we talked about it briefly on my server, and
Oh,
it's
I missed
yeah.
that.
Oh, I thought you and I talked about it, but anyway, um, yeah,
Maybe we did.
it's how do I say it's not spoiling it?
Sure.
It's an ending that kind of makes you think, right? Like there's not dang, ambiguous maybe? Should I say is I guess ambiguous
Oh,
isn't a spoiler.
it's incredibly ambiguous.
I was
Yeah.
just trying to stay away from that word to in case there's a spoiler, but I don't think it is. Like it's an
I don't think
ambiguous
it's no,
ending.
no, 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 no,
Um
no, I don't think it's a spoiler.
and I think it's like I think I'd honestly prefer the ambiguity maybe in the context of how the story went so far. Like, the story as it is versus like a clear cut man, I don't know how to articulate this well without I'm really trying not to spoil anything. Um but anyway, like I don't completely hate this ending. I guess I'll just leave it at that. Like I think it's okay. I think it's but like I agree with you 100% that I didn't feel anything when I got to the end of the book. But I think again
Yeah.
it's less of a product of the ending and more of a product of he didn't build these characters up to what they could have been. And that's honestly what I kept thinking while I was reading this book is I kept waiting for these character building, character development things that you're like, oh man, oh, I think I know it's, and I'm not saying that I wanted to predict what was going to happen, not in any sense,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's
No,
just
no, of
like,
course, of course.
there's common tropes and commonalities and stories that
Sure.
they're not, they don't hinge on, or the entire plot doesn't hinge on them, but they're these nice little things you can pepper in as a storyteller to really affect the reader. And there just really wasn't those things, or there's very few of those things in the story. And that was my
Oh,
biggest,
I mean, I think you're basically talking foreshadowing, right?
uh,
There are aspects where it feels like, oh, this might foreshadow something, and then it doesn't. And so, my complaint about the ending is not just due to the ambiguity at the end. Well, as I mentioned, it's really the last chapter. Again, without getting to spoilers, the last few tickets that get bought, to me, I wanted those to be bought in a way where, like, like it does hit me, but it hits me more because I do have an attachment to those characters at that point.
mhm.
But like, I I do feel that the last few tickets being bought is kind of like a wah, wah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like it, it it's like let's say there's a fighting tournament, 16 people. So then they go down to 8 and they go, and then now the last two, they've gone all this way. These last two people are in this fight, and a guy kind of slips, twists his knee, and because of that, the other guy punches him a couple times, knocks him out, and wins. So like,
It's kind of
I mean,
the
I get it.
classic Rocky finish, in a way, right?
You want the Rocky finish,
Yeah, exactly.
but what I just described is not the Rocky finish.
Right.
You want that like
Kind of
even if Rocky
went
loses,
out with a whimper, basically, is what you're
whimper,
saying.
yeah, instead of it being like even if Rocky loses that last fight, you want him to go out like giving it his all.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that again because I'm not saying that they have to be necessarily happy endings, which would be like even if you lose, you could still have a happy ending of well he gave it his all, he blah blah blah, like that could still be a happy ending in a way.
Yeah.
You could still have
It's like a bittersweet ending. Yeah, it's a bittersweet ending where it's like maybe he lost the fight, but he he learned something, like something he gained something that is greater than the win of the fight,
So I'm saying like with these last few tickets being bought, I don't even need that. It could just be a thing of like, when the time was nigh and this person needed to stand up, they didn't, and now that like this is the consequence. Like again, emotional fulfilling for me is not even like bittersweet, or it could be any of those, or it could be like this is what happens when you don't stand up, or something like that. Like like a one where maybe Rocky's overconfident and he gets his tail, given to him, or something like that. Where that still to me is different than like a kind of a and the ticket spot. Okay, now moving on to the next person. Okay, ticket spot gone, and it's just like again, as you said, it's the ending with a whimper as opposed to a bane, whatever kind of bane that is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of different ways you can do bane, and I just really don't want to give anyone listening the idea that like no, it has to be positive. I am not saying that at all.
Right.
It can be very, very, very negative, but I want it to have impact.
Yep.
And so while I was emotionally impacted at the deaths, as these are characters I'd grown some attachment to, I didn't want them to die. Sorry, buying tickets. I just didn't. It came too quickly. I think that's my issue. Just like oh, like you just drove by and what? Did I miss something? And you kind of read back like, no, that's okay. That's that. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. It's that kind of a feeling. And that was my real issue. I was okay with that to an extent with some of the earlier characters, even characters that, you had some sort of attachment with. I don't know if you remember that at earlier points, you're like, wait, that's it. That person just bought his ticket, and now we've just moved on from him.
Hmm. Yeah,
names that right? Not rando 2 or 3, but like I know this name. And it's just like, oh, okay, we just moved on. But to do that in the last chapter, basically with the equivalent of an Act 3, it just, I don't know. I'm still not as much a fan. And again, like whether you view as a given excuse or not, I just chalk that up to freshman in college, 18, 19 years old. How good of a writer are you going to be at that? Some people might be really good. I think the average person, I can only imagine what I think if I reread stuff I wrote when I was 18 or 19 years old.
Yeah. No, I'd be curious to know what Stephen King would do differently, because just like you read this book when you were a kid and you read it again as an adult many years later from a completely different worldview. and experiences and all that, like what would King do? Or would he keep it exactly the same as he did? Because like, I don't know, maybe for him, a lot of times fiction is about capturing the moment, like who was I at this point in time? And this is the story I'm going to tell. And
Sure.
granted, yes, if I had like, he's in his 70s now. If he's like, if I had all this life experience, I could pepper in all these cool things about all the wisdom I've gained over the years. But also, sometimes a story is what it is.
It might
But
have a
yeah,
different voice.
might have a different voice. It's funny though.
Yeah.
I definitely recognize the Kingisms this early on. Like he's changed for sure in a lot of ways, but like just the vocal, the dialogue, and a lot of the very clever, he's a very witty writer. There's a lot of clever just metaphors or similes and things like that in it that again, I'm still very very amazed at a guy so young wrote this. So despite
I am.
despite its flaws,
Yeah, I am glad that. So in the Bachman books, there is one metaphor that is used twice in two different stories.
I think
It's used
you
once
mentioned
in
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
what? Yeah, it's
No,
used
at
once
another
in
time, yeah. Mhm.
and once in Running Man, where it's a person climbing up into a chair and saying or thinking it was like climbing Everest. And the second time I ran into it, I'm like, stop. Don't use the same metaphor.
Well,
Two
it's
different characters.
yeah. I think about that often because we often have phrases or things that we
Sure,
are just comfortable with, and like as being prolific as King is, and how many books he's written, you're going to
sure.
repeat yourself sometimes. But I'd say in the proximity of those two novels, they're pretty close
Yeah,
together, more or
yeah.
less.
You know,
So yeah, that's
and
funny.
the last thing I'll mention about the Lone Walk, I am curious when the movie comes out because when I was rewatching the trailers after reading the book, there appears, and I could be wrong, there appears to be at least one character who buys his ticket differently in the trailer than he did in the book.
Hmm.
I could be wrong. You know,
Maybe I would imagine there's probably going to be a lot of changes.
so this will be the interesting thing because we keep on talking about like the ending, like well, for the things we don't like.
Yeah,
It
how
makes me wonder. It makes me wonder what kind of rewrites, or what's the actual term? Kind of like what Peter Jackson changed things about from the Lord of the Rings books
yes,
for the movies,
yeah.
and so I'm curious what will be changed from the Long Walk book to the movie. I obviously this is not going to be like the Running Man Schwarzenegger movie, which we were discussing before we were recording, where it's like everything, basically everything. So I am curious what, because again, it appears to me that one character, and maybe I just confused him with a different character in the trailer. Uh, it appears that they buy their ticket differently than the book,
Hmm.
which, given who this character is, I have kind of mixed opinions on. But we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. All I know is I do not envy the writer who adapted this because
Mm.
it's a straight shot, man, all the way to the end, and to keep people's attention in a film is going to be quite the challenge. And that
Yeah,
ending, we'll
yeah,
we'll see
that's
how it
going to be
goes.
interesting.
Cool.
I did not realize the first time I saw the trailer who plays the major.
Oh yeah, Mark Hamill. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by that. Did you recognize the name of the writer of the film?
No, it's like Dick Francis or
Okay,
something, right? I think
okay. Oh
something
no,
like that. I don't
oh no,
remember.
I don't know.
Anyway, well, I guess we'll cut it here, Kit.
Yep,
It was great chatting with you about this. I would
yeah.
say that you've definitely made me appreciate this novel more, give me your perspective. So, and this is why I like having these chats. So I'm not
Are you
like
looking forward to?
reading it
Are
and
you going to see the
asking.
film?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to see it. I think because I've
Okay.
read the book and I'm just curious to see how they do it. So, but maybe I'll have you back on for Rage. Maybe I'll read Rage and we'll chat about that.
Okay.
Cool. All right, man. Well,
Have a
thanks
great
for
rest
hanging
of your
out.
day.
All right, you too, man. All right, bye.